Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're going back to our roots, our episode-by-episode coverage of Star Wars Rebels. We're in the middle of Season 3. Today we're talking about episodes 12 and 13, Ghosts of Geonosis. We're talking about a bug. We're talking about the return of some characters. We're talking about drawings in the sand that are a little bit more subtle than what might have been shown in a prequel movie. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm your host, Matthew. I use they, them pronouns.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hayashi, she, her.
And I am Paul Hoppy, aka Zen Madman.
And today we're talking about, as I said, Ghosts of Geonosis. This has mostly been myself and Sarah. It was Riki for a while, talking about the Rebels episodes. Paul is, once again, not a host.
Totally not a host.
Not even a regular guest. Just a guest du jour. And it often happens to be du jour. But so this was one of the episodes Paul was mostly really excited about. So we're glad to have them on. Really glad to have Sarah as well. And Paul, why don't you take it away by, for those who either haven't seen these episodes or saw them a while ago and want to be reminded, tell us what happens in these episodes, the Ghosts of Geonosis.
Fantastic. I'm going to literally read the Wikipedia entry with a small amount of editorialization.
That's what we've been doing for years.
Fantastic. So, after the legendary Saw Gerrera, portrayed by Forrest Whitaker, and his rebel squad go missing on Geonosis, the Ghost crew is sent to investigate. Ezra, Kanan, Rex, and Chopper split off to search for Saw, while Hera, Sabine, and Zeb stay behind to salvage a still operational shield generator. Ezra and his group are rescued from a battle droid ambushed by Saw, who explains that the droids killed the rest of his team and that they were rebuilt by a Geonosian survivor. Ezra, Saw, and the rest of the group pursue the Geonosian, and it activates more battle droids, which attack Sabine and Zeb. Destroyers, which are very scary. Ezra manages to corner the Geonosian, and Saw destroys its control device, disabling all the battle droids. Saw then begins to interrogate the Geonosian, demanding that it tell him what the Empire was building on Geonosis in response to Saw's questions. The Geonosian, named Click-Clack by Ezra, draws two circles in the dirt, concentric circles, really. Not understanding what Click-Clack is trying to say, Saw handcuffs Click-Clack and forces him to lead them deeper into the ruins. Ezra becomes concerned at the hostility Saw is showing to Click-Clack, and Rex explains that Saw's sister was killed by a Geonosian-built gunship during the Clone Wars. Meanwhile, an Imperial patrol detects life signs on Geonosis and sends scouts to investigate. Underground, Click-Clack leads the rebels to his hideout, where he was protecting a Geonosian queen egg. The rebels then bring Click-Clack back to the Ghost, where Saw begins torturing Click-Clack and threatens to destroy the egg and probably extinguish the species if he doesn't talk, ignoring the crew's objections. Ezra then points out Saw would be no better than the Empire if he destroys the Geonosian's last chance of survival as a species, causing Saw to reconsider. However, the Imperials send an attack force after the Ghost, forcing it to flee deep underground. In an underground chamber, they find large containers full of poison gas that the Imperials had used to exterminate the Geonosians. Saw decides to give the Geonosians a second chance at survival and lets Click-Clack go. Click-Clack flees deeper into the tunnels. The rebels then try to escape with the gas containers to use them as proof of the Empire's atrocities, but they are lost when they blast their way through an Imperial cruiser. Bail Organa notes that without the containers, there is insufficient evidence for the Senate to act, but the pictures the crew had taken can be used as propaganda to further the rebel cause. Kanan reminds Ezra that, like Saw, not all rebels fighting for the same cause or for the same reasons. But Hera muses that despite her misgivings about him, Saw proved that he was better than the Imperials. That's a really long
bar.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. One quick note I want to mention. So this episode was aired on January 7th, 2017. Rogue One, in which we had the live action version of Saw appear for the first time, played by Forrest Whitaker, aired on in December of 2016, December 16th. So they were literally about 1 month apart. So very clearly, I think these were coordinated to come out at similar times, and the authors of this knew about the view of Saw we were going to get in Rogue One and vice versa.
Right.
Wait, did you say December of 2016?
Yeah, so Rogue One came out December 16th, 2016. This came out January 7th of 2017.
My brain's in summer mode, and I heard you say June, and I'm like,
Okay.
June and December are 6 months. They're 1 month apart. Okay, sorry.
January.
It was actually, it was less than a month. It was about 3 weeks,
Yeah.
probably.
Right.
So,
Nice.
yeah, what'd y'all think of these episodes?
Yeah, I enjoyed them. I mean, I enjoyed almost all Rebel episodes, so like it's hard to go bad. It was good. I like the two-parter. I feel like we got a lot of good lore, good Geonosian lore. Saw Gerrera, what a jerk. But yeah, I mean no huge complaints, I guess. Paul?
Yeah. Are you asking me for complaints? Like that's what I'm here for.
No,
usually.
I'm also here for
no,
complaints.
no.
Don't worry about it.
Sarah has not really experienced the misanthrope that is Paul Hoppy,
Fair,
so perhaps
fair.
we can show the world a different side.
Yeah, I usually am on the casts with Sarah of things that I like particularly, right?
True.
So that helps. And I did particularly like this pair of episodes, this little story. Saw definitely has got some issues, but I liked the sort of the treatment of Click Clack in terms of the story, right? I mean, obviously not Saw's treatment of Click Clack, but I like when they, they have stories where there is a bit of a question about why are the Geonosians not treated as well as kind of more human looking aliens? And it's like, well, probably because they don't look as much like humans, But that here, it's like, no, this is a person who lost their family, and so they attacked the people who then came in wandering about, and they're just trying to protect themselves and their potential future family in this egg, and the sort of the theme of Saw and like how do you go about fighting for what you're fighting for, and sometimes do you. Sometimes there's some sort of sanctimonious, oh, well, you have to do it this way. And it's like, yeah, that's generally, I think, misguided. But then also there's often like, well, if you're literally doing the thing that you're mad about someone else doing, you're not presenting an alternative to people, right? You're just being like, no, I'm going to be the one doing the genocide instead of the empire. It's like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
I really like these episodes as well. I think especially because, and I think this is very intentional, early in the season, you had Ezra kind of flirting with the dark side somewhat, both quite literally in terms of the holocron, remembering things that Maul had taught him.
Hey there, holocron.
And also,
sorry.
Using some techniques that, Kanan and others, including we had some disagreement on this podcast, things like him like controlling the walker during combat. And I think it was, I really liked it because I think, as much as I love I feel like the original movies, as good as they were, they did offer a lot of nuance, but they still painted some things in fairly black and white terms. The light side and the dark side alone. And I feel like with every new version of Star Wars, we're getting more and more nuance. We're getting more and more gray shading of those lines. And I feel like, Ezra didn't do you watch the original movies and it feels like your first step into the dark side, you are now Darth Vader. And you are now the most evil that's ever eviled. And by the time of Jedi, we nuanced that somewhat. But now, having Ezra explore that and have there be some level of, maybe that wasn't the worst thing he did. And look, he can also pull back some. Saw isn't a Force user, but I feel like his story is very similar in terms of, he has the good goals, and he's willing to cut corners. He's willing to he's not fighting with a code of honor. He's not fighting with we need to uphold certain principles. He's motivated by anger and hate and fear, and that's clouding his judgment, which is, I just really like that. Cause it's not that the Force is this mystical thing. It's that's how emotions work. That when you hate something, even if you hate it for the best of reasons, it can take you to bad places. Not always, but it can. And I just loved how Saw's story, I felt like, really kind of mirrors Ezra's story. And so for Ezra specifically be the one to pull him back, it's fascinating about Saw, but it's also a really nice showing of where Ezra is in that journey as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said about the nuance because, I mean, even our objectively good guys are kind of treating Click Clack not the best. I mean, it's nowhere near the straight up torture that Saw Gerrera is doing, so like by comparison, it looks awesome. But they're like, I mean, when Ezra tries to communicate with him, like clearly he understands Basic, he just can't speak it because presumably it's different anatomy. And he's like talking slowly to Click Clack, and the whole like, your name's too complicated, I'm gonna just call you Click Clack instead. It's also like not my favorite thing.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's like a little bit of an interesting parallel there to like learning names in languages that you can't speak, where like in Earth human languages, like I think there's some number of phonemes, right? And I think it's like 100 something or 200 something, and languages typically I think use somewhere on the order of 30 to 50. This is ballparking numbers that I read one time, like 5 years ago. But basically each language will use a subset of the phonemes that like the sounds that all human languages pull from, right? And so when somebody tells you their name in a language that you don't speak, and that language uses phonemes that are not in your language, like, you literally can't hear exactly what they're saying in terms of understanding and hearing the difference between certain aspects of the pronunciation. And so the best you can do is do your best, right? And I think it's very important to always make this good faith effort, this serious effort to try and pronounce something as close to the way somebody's telling you their name is. But at the same time, I do think there needs to be some understanding of like, look, I literally need to learn new sounds and learn how to perceive them. And as a baby, like, we learn whatever our first languages are, like, through thousands of hours of exposure, right? So, like, it's not going to be perfect. But having said that, it's like, there's a clear difference between making the effort and being like, oh, whatever, I'll just call you this,
Yeah.
And here I feel like Ezra's, like, he looks good by comparison, but, like, yeah, he could have probably done a better job of it, right? And
yeah, and I mean,
sure.
like, I mean, I don't expect Ezra to be like the perfect humanitarian, right?
For sure.
Like, it's
sure.
fine. He's a kid, as Matthew noted. He was like just flirting with the dark side not too long ago,
right?
So yeah, like, he's not perfect, but I do think Star Wars is like a great vehicle for like what Paul was talking about. Like, I'm learning Japanese, and there's like a sound that's a blending of like the English L and R, and I'm like, I can't make it's really hard, but I'm also learning that like the English R sound, the way that we make it by like folding our tongue kind of up, is just it's a dumb way to do it. Most other languages don't make it that way.
Yeah, it's certainly very uncommon, right?
Very uncommon, and that's why like little kids don't really make that R sound, and that's why they talk with little kid voices. But anyway, I'm going off on a linguistic tangent. I think like with Chewbacca, like Wookiees, I think are a good example, right? Where it's like clear that Wookiees understand Basic, but cannot speak it. But it's fine because, like, most people can, or some people can understand Wookiee, and they just, like, go back and forth in their own languages, and it's fine. And we have, like, basic names for all the Wookiee characters. But I think a sort of consideration of, like, well, I'm physically incapable of pronouncing your name. Is it okay if I call you Click Clack?
Yeah.
Instead of, like, that's too tough, I'm calling you Click Clack, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was really interesting, the way that was portrayed, and I agree with you. Like, it's not, they treat him much better, but there's still a level of, like, condescension, I feel like, you know? And one thing I do think was interesting, and this is, like, Paul and I in Superhero Ethics have talked about this a lot, but this is such a graphic indication of this. I appreciated that they took someone like the Geonosians, who till now had always been presented to us as not only enemies, but, like, very inhuman enemies. You know, first of all, they were never individuals except for their leader or the queen. They were like, you know, a hive mind. They were bugs. You know, Rex keeps calling them bugs, so does Saw. If you look at a picture of a Geonosian from the Clone Wars, and then, like, look at a picture of Click Clack. Yeah. Like, Click Clack is cute.
Right,
you know?
right.
The eyes are quite large. There's no sign of wings whatsoever. Like, the things that make him look bug-like are not there.
Right.
And compare that to a picture from the Geonosian and the Clone Wars. I may actually make this the cover art as those two pictures. They're radically different.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, this is such an interesting case of how you portray someone, like how you use visual symbols to say this is the enemy versus to say this is someone you should relate to.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah. It's the whole like dehumanization that the stormtroopers brought us originally, right? Like they all have the masks on, so we don't have to look at human faces getting slaughtered by the millions. Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is interesting. Like, watching this episode didn't, like the first time I saw it, didn't make the connection between these Geonosians and the Geonosians in the Clone Wars, which I think a lot of them get killed without any real thought, right?
Yeah.
And I think, were they in the, like, Ahsoka and the other Padawan
Well, we first see them
episode?
at the end of the second movie, Attack of the Clones.
Oh, right.
You know, the scene where
yeah.
where Padme gets her shirt ripped in a very strategic way, and Obi-Wan and Anakin, they're all like fighting these big bug monsters, and then the Jedi arrive, and all these bugs fly down from the stands to fight them. Those are all Geonosians.
Right.
See, I remember them from the Clone Wars because I haven't seen the prequels in forever.
Yeah.
And there was like an episode arc where they were like literal zombies, and they were like turning.
Oh yeah.
The clones into zombies for this like hive mind, and it was very like I walked with a zombie, and also had like some interesting implications of like voodoo and like African religion and how we perceive that. Go check out that episode. I know we did a whole thing on it in the podcast before, but yeah, like from that to adorable little click clack, yeah, they're nigh on unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate that that people feel the need, or that there is the need, in order to make people perceive, someone as being like worth consideration by like, well, you have to make them cute, right? Like,
right.
I mean, and I think it works. Like, it's a tactic, right? It's a strategy. Like, it's not just like, oh, this is just what we're doing because it's what we've always done. But it would be nice sometimes to see someone not do that and be like, no, most people are going to find them hideous. But like, that still doesn't mean that they're not worthy of consideration.
Well, I think like Cy Snoodles is like a really great example of that. She's in the Clone Wars. She's like a lounge singer gangster girlfriend, and she's like a blob with long legs and a snout, and like is like a monster looking. Like she looks like a character from All Real Monsters, kind of.
Yeah.
But like the way that she's portrayed is like as a sex symbol, which is like really cool, and I'm super into that. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying, Paul.
Yeah, I mean she's in Return of the Jedi. Like she goes all the way back to being part of the band at Jabba's.
Oh, really?
And, yep.
Oh, neat. I'll have to look for her.
Oh, is she in the extended footage also? Where they do like the 20-minute like CGI musical
This
number?
is why I don't remember her. Right, but I do like, she's like a weird CGI, like long.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. That's her.
Right.
But her romance episode is fantastic.
It's so good. And it's her and like Zero the Hutt, and like the Hutt also,
Zero.
right? Not maybe the most.
And they really I'll pull us back from this tangent by first going a little further. They play it as like a 1920s like mobster and mall girl story,
right?
Like the mobster and his girlfriend, and like I keep waiting for her to like break into song like Adelaide from Guys and Dolls. Like it's wonderful.
It's really good. Yeah, really noiry. Yeah.
One other thing I really liked about this episode, and this is again me just like I think often there's this idea that if you are fighting for a good cause, then you are doing it in a good and noble and proper way. And I utterly fell in love with Rogue One 10 minutes into the movie. Spoilers here, but we spoil everything. When Cassian Andor, who's been introduced to us as our hero, realizes that the person who is helping them, the person who just spied and gave them a mission, can't escape and will give everything away, and he kills him. And like, he feels bad about that, and he talks about how dirty his hands have gotten, but also the way the movie portrays it, if he doesn't do that, the Empire probably wins. And it's like, maybe something else happens, who knows? But surely that's the implication. And I kind of, in that same way, I like where Saw is coming from, because you do feel like, Saw's winning battles. Like, Saw's getting stuff done. And I think we can say that some things he's going too far, especially with this, Geonosian and the egg. But it's like, there'd be a way to tell this story where it was, Hera and the Ghost Crew good, Saw bad. And they don't do that. They really give Saw a chance to give his perspective some. And, I think he goes too far, to be sure. But I think, this and Rogue One both kind of portray him as, they have some points about, what the rest of the rebellion is doing.
I don't know. I definitely saw this episode as Ghost good, Saw bad. But, I don't know. It could just be me.
Yeah, no, it's not just you. I see it as I feel like the episode kind of does somewhere in between where it doesn't present to me like a real decision between which way is a better way, but it presents Saw's perspective as being reasonable one for him to have.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to put it.
And I do think there's later episodes where Saw's, extremism or perceived extremism or methods or whatever, do maybe look a little more, I don't know if reasonable, but potentially effective in context, right? Whereas in this one, it's kind of like, he's pretty much just being a tool, and it's understandable that he's trying to get this information, but there's not really any oh well, if they just did it Saw's way, maybe it would have worked,
Right.
And yeah,
I think once Click Clack shows up, especially when the egg shows up, I don't think Saw is being reasonable at all. I'm more just being early in the episodes and.
Okay. Yeah. And especially it's nice to see he and Rex, right? They get along. They're clearly pals, and we're we like Rex as a member of the Ghost Crew. But Rex too has his faults, right? Matthew, you mentioned Rex keeps calling them bugs. Rex calls them clankers, right? He's this kind of old guard, hasn't really fully worn out the Clone Wars, and even he makes. We can talk about this later. But he makes a comparison between Kanan and Anakin Skywalker, which is kind of ooh.
In a good way, right?
In a good way.
You remind me of my friend who's now Darth Vader.
Well, it was I think Kanan does a big Jedi jump, and they're oh, pretty good. And Rex is well, not as good as the brave Anakin Skywalker or whatever. And it was
but he doesn't know, right? Does he know? Did Ahsoka tell him?
He doesn't, right? But I think
that would have been a
he
scene.
Could. I think he doesn't know because he doesn't want to know.
Sure.
Yeah. It was interesting. Someone was writing on a post I saw about that they don't believe that why Rex and Ahsoka would have parted ways. That the two of them would have stayed together after the events of the Clone Wars. And one of the theories that I'm now thinking of is that it may well be because I think even I think Ahsoka started to fear that something was happening to Anakin. I think there's an indication by the end of the Clone Wars that Ahsoka has some inkling that Anakin might have become something bad. I think she knows who Darth Vader is yet. And I imagine, if you knew that and you weren't ready to tell Rex that, and Rex was just constantly oh, General Skywalker, wasn't he the best Ahsoka?
Right.
That might be hard to stick around with.
Yeah. If only General Skywalker were here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm really glad you brought up Rex, though, because I think part of what I also liked is that, Saw, I don't think Saw has something specifically against the Geonosians as much as Saw is just we have to fight the Empire with any tool we have.
Yeah.
And if this race wants to get in the way, well, tough to them. Rex, and I will admit, some of this comes out of the Clone War novels about the clones, but I think we've seen some indications of this in the show as well. Geonosis was their first ever battle. It was the first time they had left Kaminoa, and a lot of them have really bad PTSD because of it, because it was just this horrific battle that they were thrown into right from the very beginning. And so it's not a good part of Rex's character, but I buy that he doesn't trust droids, he doesn't trust Jedi, and he just even any of the other races they fought, maybe, but he just can't get past his feelings about Geonosians because that was his first fight, and it was a really hard one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's totally viable. It makes sense. I think it's great for his character. I don't love it as an aspect of his character, but I love that it's part of his character, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not a good characteristic, but I like that it's part of his character.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You wouldn't want that in a friend.
Yes,
but
exactly. Yeah.
In a fictional character, it makes sense. Yes. Yeah, I didn't realize so much that this episode is as much of a callback to Attack of the Clones, like there's that line about sand, right?
So good.
It's in this.
Yeah.
It really does get everywhere. Like,
To be fair to Anakin, like, what adult likes sand? I mean, yeah.
Right. I was like, oh, this actually is a good line.
Yeah.
You know, but like it is like, you know, Geonosis was introduced there, right? And here, you know, it fits well. And I kind of mind wiped that battle, that whole movie, really, from my memory banks. But I did see it recently, and it's like, oh yeah, it fits a little oddly with this. But this is another thing where it's like, I could see how having seen Rebels and having seen this episode can like add some enjoyment and perspective to like that movie, right?
Yeah.
And like I know, Matthew, you've talked a lot about Revenge of the Sith being more enjoyable or at least palatable to you after watching all of the Clone Wars, right? And
Right.
And I do think that I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go on about the prequel trilogy, but like to kind of take all these stories that really do come from like ideas introduced in those movies, which I didn't personally enjoy, but like, you know, I remember Riki saying, I think the last time we were covering, I think the Twilight of the Apprentice, like that, or maybe it was Kenobi in the first episodes, but like that, like if those didn't exist, then we wouldn't have this. So like, you know, would I have preferred to get prequel movies I loved? Yeah. You know, would I prefer if the Phantom Menace didn't have so much racism? Yeah. Like, would I prefer Force Speed was ever used ever again after being introduced for literally one scene? Yeah, that would probably make everything a little more coherent. But like, is the net result of those movies existing there being a lot of animation that I just absolutely love? Yeah. So like, I'm glad they exist, you know?
Yeah.
And
I think it's a really fair way to put it.
And, you know, so we have this. And this can either sort of enhance your enjoyment of the actual movies or just be like, all right, I'm glad they're there because we got this. And yeah.
Yeah. Like, there are parts of Revenge of the Sith that I've wanted to go back and watch after watching some Clone Wars stuff. And I went back and watched it again after the Kenobi show and felt like I got, you know, even more of an enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
I can't say that this episode gave me the urge to turn on Attack of the Clones when we watched that battle scene.
Right.
But like just thinking about it does matter to me because, excuse me, you know, in Attack of the Clones, we learned that the Geonosians, you know, they're not just one of the races that is as part of the Separatists. Like, they're the backbone of, you know, they're the ones who build all the droids,
right.
You know, the battle of droids. They're the one who apparently build a lot of the ships, and in a scene that is very unnecessary and very much tell don't show, you know, it takes the idea of show don't tell, and it's like, look, we're gonna put it right in your face, even though they basically already shown us. They show us that the Geonosians did build the Death Star, or were going to build the Death Star. And you mentioned the concentric circles that he draws.
Yeah,
I felt like that was one more reference to Attack of the Clones, because at least as I see it, like my understanding of what happens here is that the Geonosians helped build the Death Star. And then the Empire took these people who had been so essential to the Separatists and everything since then and wiped them all out to keep the secret of the Death Star.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that when Click-Clack draws those two circles, like, it looks like the circle of the Death Star with the circle of the, you know, the laser in, like, the upper corner. And I was like, oh. And none of the other characters get it.
Right, they think it's beautiful. The egg, ultimately.
Yeah, the egg or something else. Poison canisters.
Yeah.
And I just love it because it was like, to me, that was kind of a throwback to how, like, I remember, like, Dooku and Pogger the Elder, I think it's actually Pogger the Lesser. I don't know who Pogger the Greater is.
Yeah, Pogger the Lesser.
Like, they're talking about, like, we have to leave, do you have the plans for the weapon? And he says yes. Right. And then later they're like, let me show you the plans for the weapon. By the way, look, here's the Death Star. It's so over the top and unneeded. And this felt to me like, yeah, this is what you could have done.
Yeah. That this was the kind of subtle, if you know, you know, but they're not slamming you over the head. Yeah. For sure.
So okay, it's been over a decade since I've seen the prequels, at least. And yeah, I didn't know that the Geonosians built the Death Star. And when, Click-Clack was drawing the circles, I was like, well, that's no moon. And then they're like, oh, it's an egg. And I was like, wait, is it just an egg or is this supposed to be the Death Star? And then they get to the gas canisters and they're like, oh, it's the Empire symbol that Click-Clack was drawing. I'm like, is it? Or was it supposed to be the Death Star? And then I went on the internet and it's like, okay, no, it was. Yep. It was supposed to be the Death Star. We're good.
Definitely, yeah. But yeah, it is supposed to. You're supposed to have to kind of do a little detective work, right, and make an inference. Right. You're given the opportunity to make an inference, as opposed to like, by the way, that's the Death Star.
Yeah.
Like the funny thing is, when I rewatched Attack of the Clones, there's two scenes. There's one scene where they're kind of talking about the plans, and like off in a corner on one of the 8 screens behind them is what looks like a like holographic image of what could become the Death Star.
Yeah.
And it's very much a blink and you miss it. And I was like, oh, maybe it's not as in your face as I thought. Maybe it was more subtle than I remember.
Yeah. And that would have been perfect.
They did it again. I was like, oh, nope. Okay.
Right. Yeah, like they got it right the first time. They're like, let's make sure you really get it. And it's like, it may be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Although I imagine there was like a reaction in the theater, when people first saw it.
In my theater, it was booing, but yeah. I think
really?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that one in the theater. I remember, I'm sure I did, but I remember specifically where I was seeing The Phantom Menace. I was in Kansas City visiting my mom, and
nice.
I think right after my aunt had died, so not super nice. But the other one, Revenge of the Sith, I remember seeing with a bunch of Taekwondo people, including one who had just like smashed someone's face in and talked about relating to Anakin Skywalker. And I'm like, this isn't the best.
So for me, Phantom Menace opened literally the night of our graduation week. I don't remember if it was the night of our graduation weekend or if it was the night that our final, because I graduated in 99. It came out.
Yeah, same.
And it came out in May. So it was either the night of our last final or the night like that started off graduation weekend. But either way, a bunch of my friends from like the geeky community in our senior class and some of the younger classes too, but especially the seniors, all like we were going to go to the midnight showing. We were planning to do that 6 months in advance because we saw how the dates lined up, and we were so excited. And then we all walked out like it was just a weird thing. We were all kind of. I remember a lot of us were like afraid to say we didn't like it.
Right.
And it was maybe like everyone else liked it and we just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like we were in like a diner, 2 a.m. milkshakes or whatever, and like a couple people started to be like, yeah, I thought this part, and 5 other people were like, yeah, no, I didn't like that part. We're all just kind of.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're now way off topic. But once again, I will last tangent and then pull us back.
Call it a secant, because then we're going all the way through the circle to the other.
There we go.
Math.
There you go.
Yay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So that was a secant. I will now with a descant. And
the circle is now complete.
I
don't know. I'm just.
A+.
One more and you're editing this episode, which is fine to me. No, make it very.
If we keep it short, I'll edit this episode.
Yeah, I think we're gonna. We're
doing pretty good.
I feel like we've said most of what I want to say about this episode. Is there other big things you wanted to get into, or small things?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the topside group. I don't know. I like how we get Zeb and Sabine and Hera. Like when they first split up, I thought it was weird that like Zeb wasn't going underground where the catastrophic battle might have happened. Right. But I really like him being paired with Sabine retrieving this shield generator situation, and then the like slowly trying to navigate around the minefield of battle droids. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just thought it was like a really interesting scene and a really nice moment. A lot of really nice moments between Zeb and Sabine, which like isn't a pairing that we usually get. And I like that. Yeah, they're mixing it up. Who we see together.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you also don't get a lot of Kanan and Ezra and Chopper. I mean, you get some, right? I guess that's the same crew we had in like Twilight of the Apprentice also. But like having different sort of subgroupings, I think is really nice. And yeah, Zeb and Sabine and like, the sort of like figuring out to use the shield generator as a shield generator. I kind of feel like that Hera said to do that, right? I kind of feel like that would have been a Sabine idea from what we get from her later in the series. Mm-hmm. Like I like that Hera thought of it, but it feels to me like maybe Sabine could have just been like, yeah, I'm just going to do this thing because like I'm a tech genius. I thought it was kind
of both. Like Hera said, is there a way to do it? And then Sabine figured out how to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I get what you're saying about like Sabine. It seems like Sabine would have come up with that idea, but I mean, I don't know. When you've got a hammer, all you see are nails sort of situation, right? Like when you've got a little narrow path to get back to your ship.
Yeah, or like when you're surrounded by destroyers, like
yeah,
you know,
not your most brilliant idea.
I did sort of raise an eyebrow that like as the destroyers were turning on, there was a good like 20 seconds before their shields turned on, and I was like, maybe fire now.
Well, there's like a full second between when they shoot at them and then the shield goes on and deflects the blasts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I didn't see Kylo Ren stopping the blasts, you know.
That's also true.
But you know, that's just that's dramatic. That's called dramatic editing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it was nice to see that they didn't like, cause first Zeb has that like, no, we can fight our way out of this, and Hera's like, no, you can't.
You absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
And have it be like Zeb be like, oh, okay, no, actually we can't. Like instead of it just always being like they can always find a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like the just like they're destroyer droids. Is that what they're called? Yeah.
I could be making that up.
No, I believe
you. Call destroyer.
Okay,
sure, sounds good. I buy it. So we saw this is our second time seeing them in Rebels, if I'm correct. The first was when they had that like weird mock battle on the planet with the droids.
Yeah,
it's good. I'm great at remembering names. I'm sorry. Get in the comments. And I think then I complained like they accidentally figured out that you have to like slowly go through the shield. You can't get something going fast through the shield. And it was like Saw and his sister who are the ones who are like training Anakin's crew like in the Clone Wars to like slowly. So I thought that was like a nice tie-in to have these droids again when we're seeing Saw again and like being reminded of Saw's sister. But like Saw was still a jerk while his sister was alive. I mean, granted his planet was like being attacked, so maybe that's what started this extremism, but the whole like, oh, they killed his sister. It's like, no, well, he was a jerk before then too. So yeah. I
mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like Saw is very similar to me to Cham Syndulla. He has, he's fighting for the right cause, but he's kind of more interested in like his people than the larger cause. And he, like, both of them are kind of into their own ego and kind of into the idea that it's their way or no way.
Oh yeah, totally.
And they're both sympathetic. I mean, like with both of them, you're like, yeah, like Cham's been screwed over by every alliance he's tried to make. You try to understand why he's like, nah, I'm done.
Right.
I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like I get why Saw is the way he is. I just wish he wasn't, right? Because it's not great. And I think I do like the way that Saw is in this episode as kind of a like a good guy who's not necessarily doing good things. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I'm circling back to it, but like this idea of like maybe just because you have the right cause doesn't necessarily mean you've got the right actions. Or, like, you can believe what you're doing is for the right reasons, and, like, maybe it's not. And, like, how they tied, Ezra is talking to Saw on, or maybe it might have been Rex, I think, who actually, like, finally got to him with, like, you're no better than the Empire if you're just gonna, like, kill Click-Clack, basically. And then, like, yeah, like, the Empire, presumably, believes what they're doing is the right like what they're doing for good and right reasons, right? And so like if Saw is kind of slowly going down this path of I'm doing this for the good and right reasons, like how far is it before he gets to the like where the Empire is at?
Yeah, I mean in some ways he's kind of similar to Anakin in that, like Anakin, and I think this is one of the things that the Clone Wars I think shows best that the movies never really captured. Anakin saw the horrors of the Clone Wars and saw just the destruction and wanted that to stop. And he saw the Senate bickering and arguing and doing nothing and it not stopping. And like, I think he was like, look, if I'm just in charge and I just tell people what to do, things will be better for everyone. And that's, I don't think it's true of everyone, but I think a lot of, I think a lot of like authoritarian leaders are just out for themselves and that's awful. But I think there are some who like maybe start from a like the world would be better if it was this way, and try other means and they don't work and like okay no I'm just gonna take over and make things like that's half of Batman villains. Or like I just want to take over and make things better. The one
Thanos,
I think I the most,
right?
Yeah, Thanos. I never remember her name, but the villain at the end of Supergirl season 1. Who like
I know who you're talking.
She wants to take over. and make everyone stop emitting carbon to fix the planet. And like, especially in a world with Joe Manchin, I'm like, please just do that. You know, like take away their.
Just do
I'll
that.
give up 5 years of free will to not die of.
To then have extra decades of free will, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for my
Breathable
children
air.
and my grandchildren and everyone's future. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. It's like eco-fascism is a slippery slope that I don't love necessarily.
And that's the thing. Yeah, because that's the thing. Is it's the like. I think the problem is often the like. I think Anakin's very much this.
Yeah.
Is once you say, I am the person who can save everything. Now anyone who gets in your way is an enemy of saving everything, and that's how you just can justify the most worst. Like, I don't think Palpatine ever wanted anything but ultimate power.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
no, I think Palpatine is in it for ultimate power, and like because the dark side feels so good to him. But I think like a lot of like lesser higher ups in the Empire are presumably doing it because they want to bring peace and harmony to the galaxy, and these darn rebels are standing in the way of this order that they're gonna impose, and things are gonna be so good for everybody if they just let them control everything.
Two books that I would strongly recommend if you enjoy stories like that. One is Dark Disciple. I'm sorry, not Dark Disciple is a great book, but one is Fallen Star, which is that's the one. It's about like two kids who grow up, and one goes to the rebellion and one goes to the Empire, and it's a fabulous romance among other things. But it really shows like these kids who grew up in the midst of the Clone War and are like, thank God the Empire's here. And the other one, I'm only now starting it, but it's called Dooku Jedi Lost, and it's actually a screenplay for like a movie that never got made. But it really goes more into Count Dooku and shows how he was someone who was deeply frustrated by the Senate, deeply frustrated by the ongoing war, and deeply frustrated by the direction that the Jedi were going, among other things that the Jedi were getting so involved. And he also like he truly cared for his apprentice, his former Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn. And that it's Qui-Gon's death in doing something that he thinks the Jedi... Like, I don't think I would agree with his vision of what the Jedi should be doing, because he's very arrogant and thinks the Jedi should have more power, but also kind of just not get involved in these petty squabbles. But it's him being like, I can't be a part of an organization that would let Qui-Gon die for this silly little planet that no one should care about. And like... I disagree with that, but I was like, that makes him such a more interesting character than just mwahaha ultimate power.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely sounds like a more interesting villain than Palpatine, I mean, and I think Palpatine is deliberately not super interesting to give room for, Vader to be interesting, right? And for everything else to happen. And I think there's value in that, in having a just like, this dude's evil, defeat him and everything will be less bad until we make sequels. But like, I think, actions have intentions and consequences, and, often there's people who have obviously what they consider good intentions. And we might even agree with them like, oh, those are good intentions. I agree with what you're trying to accomplish, right? But like the actions they take aren't necessarily going to have the consequences that are intended. And I think a lot of the time that's where you get with some of these characters or real world leaders, where it's like, okay, you're going to accomplish this, but then what? And then now you're going to accomplish this. And like, maybe you are making some of the progress you intended, but maybe there's some other unintended consequences, and things can like spin off the rails,
I think that's really true. I think another part of it is that like, when you're in that mindset of like, I see this problem and no one else is talking about the problem and everyone doesn't see the problem the way I do, when someone comes along who sees the problem, that person can manipulate you so easily, because like, and I think that's like, I wish I wanted to see Palpatine, like in some of the books, you start to see Palpatine do that to Dooku. I think Palpatine does do that to Anakin. I think that's what, that's how you get people voting for authoritarians or liking authoritarians. Sure. They feel like no one else is listening to their concerns. And along comes this person who says, oh, I feel all your pain, and it's their fault.
Right.
Whoever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like Saw is like a good example of like the beginnings of that, at least. Like, because like they say, you know, he's fighting against the Empire. He's got the same goal as us, the Ghost Crew, the elimination of the Empire. But like his methods are vastly different. And even like it seems like his motivations with Click Clack are just like he's angry and he wants payback for what happened to his sister. And he's using the like, and this will stick it to the Empire as like a little sugar coating to like make that pill go down a bit easier. Like I fully believe Saw's lying to himself about why he's so upset with Click Clack and why he needs to like take him and interrogate him and who cares what happens to this egg.
I got this. Go ahead, Paul.
I do want to throw in one thing that like when I first started watching this episode, I was like, oh right, this is going to be relevant later. Like Click Clack did kill all of Saw's people, right? Like,
well, not personally, but sure.
No, but I mean, had them killed, right? I mean, if you consider the droid's weapons, that was Click Clack's weapons.
Oh,
right?
Gotcha. Yes. At the beginning.
I'm not talking about his people. I'm talking about his crew,
crew,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he goes to this planet to do a thing. He brings a crew, and they all get killed by Click Clack. Like, it is very understandable for him not to be like, okay, let's proceed reasonably now that you've killed everybody else I came with. You know,
and I'll admit,
I'm going to give him some slack
the way the episode's told, I completely forgot about that.
Right. They don't like, they like have that be a plot point early, and then by the second episode, they kind of drop that. And I think that does a little bit of a disservice and makes it a little bit kind of, you know, it lets us see Saw more just as this guy who doesn't have a point, which when you were talking earlier, I was like, well, I don't really feel like they're showing, you know, that maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. It's like, well, and maybe that's still true, but like, he definitely had a very reasonable reason to be mad. Like, you killed all my people right here. I came with these people, they're all dead now. Like,
but there's like, there's like one throwaway line too, which I wish they would have elaborated more on, which is like, you kind of broke into his house.
That's true
with a bunch of guns. Like, I don't know what you were expecting here.
Right, right.
And like, I kind of like that in many ways it lets us forget, because I think the episode is supposed to be kind of from Ezra's perspective, and I think he forgets. But, I think it would be much more powerful if, like, towards the end, Saw was able to be like, hey, he killed all my, like, someone was like, why are you so mad at him? It was like, he killed all my people.
And it's like,
and Ezra has to be like,
Yeah.
Though there is, I thought, one other thing that I think is happening with Saw that I actually think isn't about particular feelings towards Click Clack, though there's a lot of that too, which is, I think, another thing that can happen as you start to get into that mindset of, like, everyone's against me, everything is, you know, standing in my way to get the good and the just and the right, is, you know, everything is going wrong intentionally, you know? And so, like, to me, I think one of the central things is that, like, everyone else realizes Click Clack would happily tell Saw the answer to his questions.
Right.
But they can't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
But Saw is like, no, he's just lying. He's just not.
Yeah.
Right.
He could tell us if he wanted to. And I think, to me, that was really interesting of how much Saw gets locked in that place of, like, I won't believe that this is just impossible. You always think, no, that it must be a conspiracy. It must be a plot. They must have a reason. It's never just like, it's just a bad thing that you can't communicate to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, like, framing it from the, he murdered my whole crew just moments ago, or, like, a week ago? I don't even know. I don't know what a cycle is.
Some indeterminate period of time before.
Yeah. An indeterminate period of time ago, all right? So, like, he's trying to finish me off, too. But Saw's not thinking of it from the, I busted into his house with a crew and a bunch of guns perspective, right? He's thinking of, like, I came here to do a mission and investigate where all the people went, and there's this one lone soldier who's, like, eradicating all people who come to this planet. Therefore, it's him. Yeah.
Right.
And, like, there was a moment where I was kind of like, okay, so you want to get more information from Click Clack, but Click Clack wants to stay and bury this egg. There's a protocol droid somewhere in your fleet who can translate. Like, you could just bring that droid here. Yeah. Like, there is a solution here somewhere.
Bring AP5 on missions. Come on.
Yeah. I was going to say, we don't have this problem with C-3PO around.
Yeah.
No, we have a lot of other problems.
We have a lot of other problems.
Maybe that's the trade-off, right?
Would not have gone as well. But jumping across that chasm would have been a little rough.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, I did love that scene, though. I've really loved, both because from the disability side, but just also for the character, watching, I think in many ways, Kanan is a stronger Jedi now that he has lost his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of exactly what the Bendu said, your eyes will never work, but you will see again. And just that scene of him, like, he has to ask someone else to shoot the thing to make the bridge fall, but once it does, he can catch it and turn it. I was just really moved by that scene.
Yeah. I liked this scene, but if you have the Force powers to hold up a bridge with two dudes on it, couldn't you just hold up the dudes themselves?
You would think.
Right? Like, I thought he was gonna catch it.
Don't look at what the magician is doing behind the curtain.
I know.
Just look at the pretty lights.
But, like, the easy explanation was, like, he just, like, it's big enough, he catches it and, like, places it where the bridge should be, and then they walk across it. Right? Instead of he holds it and
levitating it
at
the
the
whole
same
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on the, like, I mean, just the scalability of Jedi powers to the writer's whims. Across all of Star Wars, I'm looking at you, Force Speed, is, like, pretty
force
epic.
Healing.
And Force healing,
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I loved
If anyone bothered, like, if I was going into battle all the time with this Padawan who was going to kind of often get in my way, I would make sure they would always learn Force healing,
Right.
Yeah.
But it seems like people didn't all know that was a thing, right? Like, there's all these things that, like, you can learn to do, and then once one person discovers metal bending, everybody can do it in the sequel. Wait, that's the wrong show.
Well, but like if if Obi-Wan knew just a little of that, because, like, apparently, like, 5 years later, getting stabbed in the gut is not actually life-threatening.
I know.
It's only for Qui-Gon.
If Qui-Gon were just angrier and wanted vengeance, he would have been fine.
Obi-Wan just needs to put a Band-Aid on it. So.
Yeah. Well, it's clear, like, Rey just watched the Mandalorian episode that aired right before.
Right, exactly.
Rise of Skywalker came out.
It's
like, oh, right.
There you go.
Yeah, a
This
little
exists.
while
But,
after.
I mean, I like... So you mentioned Dark Disciple a minute ago, Matthew. And I just finished reading it. It's A+ super great.
So good.
So good. And I like... They talk about Quinlan's power of, like, touching stuff and, like, getting Force memories. And it seems like that's a special to him power. And I would really love to see it more explained that way. Like, Grogu has magic Force healing powers. The end. Right? Like, this is a thing that he can do, and it's his, like, special talent. Right? And, like, other Jedi can tap dance or whatever. Like, they have other specializations, and, like, some Jedi can't. Just, like, there's one who could super speed run, and that was it.
Right,
because they knew it really well, right? Like,
Yeah.
Qui-Gon can become a Force ghost and, like, taught Yoda, who taught Obi-Wan, but not every Jedi can become a Force ghost. Like, there's these little specializations, and, like, some people are good at things and some people aren't good at things. And that's why we have these disparate levels of ability. I would, like to see that. It's interesting that they've done it for a couple Jedi, but haven't just hand-waved it for everybody.
That's a thing,
Yeah. Like, Quinlan makes sense to me. He has Auspex level 4, Spirit Touch.
Right, yeah. I was thinking I was like, what level of Auspex is that?
I think it's 4.
What is
Maybe
this?
it's 3. It's from Vampire the Masquerade, a role-playing game that Paul and I played quite a lot when we were younger,
I've
and
heard
still
of
play
that.
every now and then. At least I do. All right, I do think we should start wrapping up, though, now. Like, 20 minutes ago, I was worried we didn't have much more to say, and then we found 8 more things. So this is not surprising, but it's worth note. Paul, what are you up to these days?
We're doing a new thing, right? Where we are going to stream on Twitch every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Panda time. And we're going to be doing, I guess, mostly superhero ethics on those days, right? But maybe after, when, like, Andor comes out, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to be superhero ethics, but we're also choosing that day because that is the Wednesdays are the day that Andor is going to go live. Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning.
Right.
So it'll be if there's a show that comes out, She-Hulk is also coming out that same 2 weeks later on that same day. But Disney Plus is basically just going to drop everything.
Wednesdays.
Everything's coming out Tuesday midnight, Wednesday the next day.
Why?
So yeah.
Why?
But so we're gonna do that. We're gonna start when you hear that this episode will go up on Thursday, and the first time we're gonna do it will be the Wednesday after. Have we picked our first topic for that Wednesday?
I think we're doing Ip Man 4 and Cobra Kai 4.
Yes,
season 4,
yes, that's right.
Which have similarities in certain ways, and some Easter eggs too, which I really enjoyed. So I think that'll be fun.
Sarah, your face lit up. So if you want to
Yeah.
join us, you and Riki are both very welcome.
He was watching Ip Man, who I thought was Ip Man for the longest time.
Yeah.
There we go.
I thought it was I thought it was IP Man.
That's a common one.
Intellectual property
That's a
man.
common one.
And I just caught like the tail end of it where it was like Ip Man helped China defeat Japan in World War II, and I was like, is that how that went? But yeah,
That's a claim.
Yeah, that's maybe not a fully historical account. We did a podcast on the first one and talked about that a little bit as well.
It's great. I'll have to give it a listen.
Yeah.
Sarah, what are you up to these days?
Oh my gosh, so much work. Yeah. I'm teaching and sleeping, and that's about it seems. But you can find my stuff. I'm on Instagram at Sarah Hayashi Art. I keep saying I'm going to make a website one of these days, but who knows?
Awesome. You definitely should. Yeah, I still have some of the ceramic products I got from Sarah. Some great like coffee mug things that are. I've actually been eating soup out of. When I had root canal and I couldn't really chew anything, I would just like get like just a soup that had no chunks, like tomato soup or something. Pour it in one of those mugs, heat it up, and then just sip out of it. It was great.
Yay!
Awesome.
Of course, you can find all the things that I do at theethicalpanda.com. That's where you'll find this podcast, Superhero Ethics, other stuff that I do from time to time, Panda Vision. We were talking about The Boys and Umbrella Academy. And you can also there find all the ways to give us feedback. We love feedback. We love hearing from you. What do you think about these episodes? What do you think about Saw? Is Saw your hero? Is he misunderstood? Is Saw terrible and you hate him, or you think he's a great villain but someone you love to hate or hate to hate? Either way, let us know. All the contact information is at theethicalpanda.com. So please check all that out. Check out all the things that Paul and Sarah are doing. And most importantly, we're all fans. Let's be good to each other. Kenobi!
Someone had to do it.
Yep.
It's good. Oh man, I hate sand. Gets everywhere.
Sand is the worst.
It was so, like, it's a not terrible line if you don't immediately compare it to your lover afterwards, I guess.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, just in a vacuum, it's like that is a sentiment I can agree with.
Yeah.
It is very annoying growing up on a desert planet. Lots of chafing, I'm sure. Right?
Yeah.
But, like, not romantic.
Yeah.
Not a romantic thought.
It's definitely not in the movies. I think in Clone Wars and in, like, even in, like, Dark Disciple.
I feel like in Clone Wars it's fine. In the movies it's, I mean...
Yeah.
It's not very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real terrible.
I'd fast forward through those scenes when I rewatched the prequels.
Oh my. Yeah. Gosh. Jedi.
I mean, sort of. What?
No, incel is intentional. That's
Yeah.
what the in is for.
Yeah, yeah.
Because women are trash and they wouldn't want me anyway because I'm not tall.
It's not intentional. It's involuntarily.
Oh,
celibate.
involuntary.
It's involuntarily.
Ah.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Okay, cool. It's going to be that same Google Drive because that's what I know. I'm sorry.
Cool.
Okay.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.